Okay, so I'm going to talk about something this morning that I don't think I ever heard somebody preach on before, but at least the whole topic. But this morning I titled my sermon, you can go ahead and put the, hold on, my wife's back there with the sound. You can go ahead and put the slide up. I called this morning's sermon The Tower, okay? This morning I want to talk about the Tower of Babel. Everybody kind of knows it's a really short part of the Bible in Genesis, right? But I want to catch us up to speed first before we jump into all of it. I just want to let you know I'm talking about the tower. But what I did today is I took where we were going with upraise, and I'm just kind of going right along the path, okay? So because of that, I want to fill the rest of you in about where we are. Hi, Madeline. I haven't said hi to her in a long time. All right. Anyways, so I want to get everybody up to speed, but I want to kind of give you my goals and my precedent of what I do at Upraise first, so you kind of see where I'm tracking and follow me through this sermon. So one of the things I believe in, and it sounds a little weird to say it like this, but I believe in exposing the Bible, okay? Because I trust it. It's kind of one of those things where you're not guilty, where you know you're innocent. You're like, check me, right? Check me. Fact check me. Go ahead, right? And so this is what I kind of believe the Bible to be absolutely true. So when I'm reading it, I'm okay with kind of tearing it up and exposing it and finding the underbelly of things, because I know when you put it all back together, it's perfect, okay? And I believe that there's overarching truths in the Bible. When added together, they kind of create a master truth. And so I'm kind of taking each little piece and bringing it together. And because the Bible does this, when you do it due diligence and read it, and you don't just try to find like little discrepancies, but when you actually read it and you understand it's been around for millennia, and you understand how impactful it's been, and you understand the breathtaking narrative that it brings to the table, plus the social commentary on all society, in my opinion, you come to two conclusions, okay? The first conclusion is that it's the most psychologically accurate book ever written, transcending its own time to maintain a hyper-accurate read on civilization for upward of 4 millennia, or it's divinely inspired. Those are the two options that you come with. Either way, you either revere it, you have to respect it, or you hold it sacred. Okay? And so that's kind of where I stand with the Bible. But either way, the next step forward is to embrace it, in my opinion. So where we've been, and one of the things I really believe with the Bible is that the whole of the Bible, I just have a slide for that you can put up, the whole is greater than the sum of its parts. Okay, when you start taking each piece is good, but sometimes when we're preaching or when we're learning, we take one piece and we're like, this is really, really good. But when you put it back in the mix, it's even more, right? And so that's one of the things I really stand with. And so as I'm talking with Upraise, we've been following Genesis, okay? We've been tracking along in Genesis. We started with creation. And I've been taking each section, each part, each theme, and kind of expounding upon it, what it's talking about. And so I'm going to give you the briefest review of what we've been talking about. But one of the things you have to understand when you read the Bible is it was written from an Eastern perspective. And I've said this before, but Westerners think in a line. We think X, Y, and Z have to go this way. Eastern thinkers, just like Jesus, they talk around a truth. They don't just point you at it, they talk around it. That's why Jesus was using parables. He was talking around a truth so that they would get the truth, okay? And so what I'm doing here is kind of giving you the other little pieces that we've been talking about. Anyways, so we started with creation. It was chaos, where God brings order, perfect order, his order into the mix, okay? It's extremely important to understand for today's message. It was chaos and order, the beginning of time, all right? And then we talked about the fall, the awakening of consciousness, the knowledge of the fruit of the good, of evil, of good and evil. And then we had Cain and Abel. The idea of sacrifice, it was presented in Cain and Abel. This wasn't a thing before. Sacrifice. The simple idea of sacrificing now for later, that's brilliant. And most other species of animals can't even comprehend that idea, okay? And then we talked about the ark, Noah. Okay, the absolute chaos of mankind bringing about destruction. Kind of that if we became so devolved, so chaotic, that there would be a point of no return. And I think one of the things with the Noah's story is everybody's like, there's the mean, angry God. But I don't necessarily see it that way when I bring it into context. What I see is as like a hunter, okay? God sees mankind. We're past the point that we're mortally wounded. And he's like, if I don't preserve this with Noah, it's like a wounded animal just dying slowly. And I see God coming in, stepping in, and preserving all of mankind by saving Noah in the ark and saving the animals and kind of resetting and then promising this will never happen again. So we have a hyper chaos moment. But that brings us then to the Tower of Babel. This is where we're at, okay? The Tower of Babel. Now we just had pure chaos, everyone just kind of being primordial in their existence and just going around with everything. We went from complete chaos, and now we switch over, the pendulum swings, and we're in hyper order, okay? We went from all mankind to be in chaos to all mankind trying to be in a mankind-driven order, and that's where we stand in Genesis 11, and that's where we'll be today, all right? Now, after this story, I think this story is really important, and it's sometimes overlooked because right after this story, Abraham begins. All right? And then you kind of have this historical part of the Bible take precedent. Okay? Because before that, it's just kind of, it's like stories and then hundreds of years and then another story, and then they're like, oh, and Noah was 900. It's like, oh, well, what happened? Like, if you live 900 years, I feel like you have a couple more stories in you. But so this is all going on. But the next phase is where the covenant, the whole really thing with God and this relationship with the Israelites takes place. So this is the story right before that, preceding that. And that's why I want to talk about this story, because I think it's sometimes it's an easy story to get the surface level stuff. But if we dive deep into it, it's really interesting. Okay? So the state of chaos was where mankind was, and now we're in order, okay? When you take your life, a personal life, or a group, maybe your work group, I don't know what you call that, your coworkers, or a school, a class, when you interject something stressful, when you face something stressful, usually you default to chaos or order. Okay, hyper chaos, hyper order. This is kind of a microcosm of what is going on with culture. But when something stressful happens, sometimes people spiral out of control. They hit the booze. They do whatever. They self-destruct, and they kind of go into complete chaos. But there's other people. No one in here. But there's other people out there in the world that when something stressful happens, they seek to control everything in their environment. All right? When you get angry, you clean. Just. Oh, now everybody's like, oh yeah, wait, hold on. I need control. I need order. I need order in my life, right? Because there's chaos. Okay, we just had the flood and everything else, and society is like, we must attain order. Okay? And so in Genesis 11, verse 1, I'm just going to kind of read through some of the story. Now, the whole earth had one language and the same words. And as people migrated from the east, they found a plain in the land of Shinar and settled there. And they said to one another, "Come, let us make bricks and burn them thoroughly." And they had brick for stone and bitumen for mortar. Then they said, "Come, let us build ourselves a city and a tower with its top in the heavens. And let us make a name for ourselves, lest we be dispersed over the face of the whole earth." Okay? Mankind's plan. All right. We're all mixed up here. We're all just this craziness. Let's unite. Let's create one utopian state of mankind where order reigns supreme. Okay? This is where they're at. I'm not going to jump into the rest of the story yet because I want to kind of dissect this. This is really interesting. Okay? When you look at the animal species, there's a reason they roam in packs or herds or flocks or whatever you call it, right? Schools of fish. I was like, what is fish? Right? There's a reason most animals collect together. Does anybody want to take a stab at why? Strength in numbers. There you go. That's the phrase I was looking for. Strength in numbers. Safety in numbers. Okay? When you're one of three and you're in a place where one of you is going to be called out, it's like, oh boy, right? I have a 33% chance. But when you're one of 300, it's not too bad. When you're one of 3,000, you're like, I'm pretty good here, right? Right? I'm pretty safe. And it goes on and on. And so this is one of the reasons why mankind will collect in the society, because the draw of safety, okay? And this is not just mankind, but this is also the animal world. And one of the things that's interesting is when scientists study primates, the bigger the primate's cerebral cortex or brain, the bigger the brain, the bigger their group, okay? The smaller the brain, the smaller the group. Very interesting that the mental capacity of the animal usually dictates how much of a group it can handle. Because there's comfort in large groups, and so every animal is looking for a certain size group, right? And so the primates, they'll come together and they'll make a big group. Now, this isn't surprising. We like to kind of congregate together. We not just at church, but we like to have our circle, and then our outer circle, then our outer circle, then people that aren't allowed in our circle. But we have our own little social network. Everybody does, okay? Everybody does, and with Facebook and all these other things, it's even more interesting now. Right? Which, by the way, I don't want to jump ahead, but I kind of consider the connection, the network connection, to be very similar to what's going on in this story nowadays. The Tower of Babel repeated, so to speak. Okay? But I won't get there yet. And so I'm going to keep going in this story in verse 5. So, and the Lord came down to see the city and the tower, which the children of man had built. And the Lord had said, behold, they are one people, and they have one language, and this is only the beginning of what they will do. And nothing that they propose to do will now be impossible for them. Come, let us go down and confuse their language, and that they may not understand one another's speech. So the Lord dispersed them from there over all the face of the earth, and they left off building the city. Therefore the name was called Babel, because the Lord confused the language of all the earth. And from there, the Lord dispersed them all over the face of the earth. Okay? So this is another story that gives people some trouble. When they're like, well, that's kind of rude, God. You know what I mean? Like, everybody got together. We're doing good. We got everything going right. This is great. And then God's like, no, right? And it's like, well, wait, dude, what's wrong? What's wrong with you? Why would you do that, right? It seems like God is jealous. And I know there's a precedent in this story to talk about pride. Okay? This story could be talking about the pride of mankind, building a tower to the heavens, okay? And kind of God saying, because pride is like one of the biggest deals that God has. I mean, Lucifer falls because of pride. The prince of darkness gets there in the vehicle of pride, okay? So pride is an extremely, extremely important thing to God, but I want to not jump down that. I've heard people talk about that before. I just want to give you a little bit, but I know that's the kind of immediate response to this story. Hey, mankind trying to build heaven, they're overreaching, they're too prideful. Okay, but there's something else in this story I think is really, really cool. All right, and one of the most interesting things in these verses is where he says, if they're unified, nothing could stop them from whatever they want to do, right? If they were completely unified, they couldn't be stopped, whether they wanted to self-destruct or do something great. And I find it interesting that Jesus later prays about his church being unified because he knows how powerful it is. Yet, we don't remain unified, but I'll get to that later. So, here's one of the most interesting things about this story, and I think it's fascinating. What they were trying to achieve in this place is impossible because of mankind, okay? We don't unite like that, as you can tell in the church. If Jesus had to pray for it to happen in his church and we can't even do it, it's something that's very difficult for mankind, okay? For mankind to remain together. All right. One of the things that when they talk about human social groups, your circle is probably no bigger than 200 people. And that's acquaintances and everything else, right? That's not just like your family, but that's your family, your friends, your coworkers, maybe your neighbors, and a couple other. But once you hit 200, people start getting axed off. You start to fracture. You start to say, I'm done with that. I can't do it, right? I have to quit that. I have to take a break from that. I have to stop doing it. I have to retire. Whatever it is, right? And so this is what's going on. It's very hard for a social group to get bigger for us in general. When they go over 200, they begin to fracture. And it's interesting because you want the group because it's safe. Okay? It's safety in numbers. And that's kind of the important thing to understand is running to numbers is because it's safe, but sometimes running to safety is bad because you can be too safe, right? And I really believe this is the struggle of social media. People are constantly trying to grow their group, to have more stimulation, more connection, more this. But there's a problem when it comes to that, okay? When your group becomes too big, you're comparing yourself to too many people, okay? And when you realize where we are as a culture, the internet culture, young kids especially, they're trying to connect to about 7 billion people, okay? They're comparing themselves to 7 billion people. Not their high school class of 150 kids. In fact, their high school classes are 400 kids now, 500, 600 kids. You can't even be the best at anything when there's 600 people. I mean, you could try. You might be. But it's very hard. And when your community keeps growing, you find a lack of purpose. And I really believe that's where a lot of young people are. It's like you're not comparing yourself to your town. You're comparing yourself to the entire country or the entire world now. And so it's like, oh, I play music, right? I play music and I want to try to do this. And then you go on YouTube and there's 5 million people playing music and they're all better than you. And you're like, never mind. Maybe I'll go to, someone already does that better. And even trades, I'm a mason. But now these international companies are taking over, and there's no room for you to be anything special or unique. And so this lack of purpose is falls apart, and it's one of the reasons why these big groups tend to fracture. But I want to kind of bring it to a society thing here, because the bigger and bigger the group gets, you feel safer but lose a sense of purpose. And one of the things with this idea of purpose in a group is, let's say you have 300 people, okay? And there's kind of like 100 positions that someone's trying to be the top of, right? You would say you have 100 of the best at everything, the top 100. Well, if you make that group 300,000 people, there's still only a top 100. The bottom just keeps growing out and out. But there's still only a few positions to jockey at the top. So the bottom just completely goes, and then you have, for every one person you have that's the best at something, you have 30 other people that wish they were the best at that thing, but they're not. So that kind of makes some sense. But when we take it into a society sense, this idea of everyone coming together, everyone language, this is something that we still try to do in the form of governments in this world, okay? When a government tries to create a utopia for its people by enacting hyper order, okay? This is the USSR. This is other places where it's like we want to impose one language, one belief system, one method. There's no dictating by any other person but the top, and you will assimilate into this. Didn't work so well for pretty much anybody that's ever tried it in this history, but it's something that mankind constantly tries to bring about. And the danger with this is the group attempts to become God. And this is the Tower of Babel. They try to reach the heavens. All right? Stalin was God of the utopian heaven on earth. No, right? And it goes through the same kind of ideas that we see even today of nations, of people trying to say, our group is heaven. We are perfect. We have a utopia. It's paradise. And we don't need God. And when the group tries to replace the divine, everything begins to fall apart. And notice how, Well, let me get there. Notice how every one of these nations that have done this in the past, there's no room for God. It's just a very interesting thing. There's no room for that. Government is God. Okay? So as the group gets bigger, the group would fragment. It's exactly what happens in the Tower of Babel when this totalitarian state tries to take over. Okay? So why do these things fail, though? Why do they fall apart? Because man is in a fallen state. That's it. Okay? God creates perfect order. Man rebels against God. Man kind of embraces a chaos. And so when people try to keep cramming man into a thing, there's more and more chaos introduced. All right? There's more chaos introduced to this machine that's trying to grow. And eventually it'll break apart. People will not stand for that. For some reason, mankind values diversity. We value different opinions, different voices to be heard. I mean, this is one of the things America was kind of built on, is to have different voices be heard, right? And so when we look at our nation, our experience as culture, you guys remember in 2008, too big to fail, hashtag, too big to fail, right? When the banks, the collapse in the banks, you're not allowed to fail. We need to save them, they're too big to fail. Well, God in this story is trying to show you like they're too big, they will fail. This is what's going on, and I'm going to mix up the language. I'm going to separate them and bring diversity. And not more importantly, but also importantly, I think we know there's a beauty in diversity. Okay? You don't find anything new when there's no diversity. You don't find anything different when people can't speak their minds. That's why free speech, I think, is one of the single most important things that we can fight for in general. Free speech for people who smash their microphones. Free speech for people who disagree with you. God seemed to be interested in that. He said, I don't want them all thinking the same thing. Okay? And so, in this story, again, we're right after the flood. We had hyper chaos, now we're in hyper order. And God is moving in this story. Okay? He's moving in this story. But sometimes I think we don't understand how God moves, okay? We kind of hear it, and it goes in one ear and out the other, okay? And so there's a couple things I really want to extract from this story, and it's not just this story, it's in other stories too. But it might sound like I'm saying God didn't move in this story, and it kind of just happened, okay? It kind of just would happen. If God did things or didn't do things, people would just fracture. It sounds like what I'm saying, but that's not what I'm saying. Okay, I want to be very clear. Okay? One of the problems, and I think you can do slide number 3, okay? When we think about God, we always think God acts out truth. Okay? And that's fine. That makes sense. But sometimes we don't see God. We just see the truth being acted out. And from that perspective, we should understand that the truth acted out is God. When His truths are acted out, when things that He makes, creates to be constant norms in our lives, and it acts out for us, it's like seeing God. And so many people are like, I just wish I could see God. And I'm like, you have over and over and over again. Every time His truth plays out in your life, that is like looking Him in the eyes. It's Him, okay? And the reason why I want to say this, because there is a difference, but there's not a difference in this. So in this story, this truth is being acted out. We also call God love, okay? God acts out love. But when love is acted out, it's God. Love is God. God is love. That's how that is word works. Jesus is the way, the truth, and the light. Yeah. I almost wrote life when I was doing my thing. Like the way, okay. But the way, the truth, and the light, right? And so when someone walks in His ways, they're acting as Jesus. Okay? They're not trying to dress up like Jesus, right? They're not trying to, grow a beard out and go long hair and this and that, but they're acting like Jesus because they're walking in His ways. When they're speaking His truths, They are acting like Jesus. Person is being like Jesus. When they're trying to bring the light into the world, they are acting like Christ. That's kind of what this story and other stories, one of the ways I like to look at it is sometimes the truth that come out, the precedents that are set can point us back to God. One of the reasons why I say it like this is because when I read the Bible, like I'm kind of a skeptic when it comes to things, so I kind of like to take the spiritual cover off a second and see how it works, and then reapply the spiritual stuff. Because if you take the spiritual stuff off and everything is just, it doesn't make any sense, it doesn't work, it's all this, sometimes I'm like, that's kind of like a playing on emotions and this and that. But when it logically makes sense, because the Bible does logically make sense when you read it, it's more beautiful than when you put the covering of the spirituality back on. I find it really fascinating when you do this. So, in this story, we find mankind trying to be united and mankind falling apart. And again, like I said before, Christ prayed for us to be unified and together, and we still manage to fall apart because chaos. Chaos in us. We can't be unified. It's hard for us to be unified. Everybody disagrees with one another. Speaking in tongues, that's separated how many churches? One thing, that really doesn't matter. I mean, it really doesn't make that much of a difference. Whether, if I don't speak in tongues, okay? Well, there's like a laundry list of 1,000 other things you need to do, so it's fine if you don't want to speak in tongues, right? Why are you separating churches because of that, right? And there's lots of other things that lots of petty things. Sometimes it's the paint. People are like, I don't like this color. We're leaving the church. You laugh, but it happens, right? And so it's just this kind of weird. Everyone's looking to disperse. Everyone's looking to separate. And a lot of times they're trying to find a reason to separate, right? Like, when someone's looking for a reason. It's different than if something just naturally comes, where they blow up about the stupidest, like the paint, I remember us talking about painting this wall black, this back wall, and for the camera and stuff like that. And they were like, ooh, I don't know. Someone might get offended. I'm like, that's kind of crazy that we have to think that, but also it's probably not wrong. Somebody might be like, I don't like that. Black is dark and evil and this and that and the other thing. But you never know, right? But this is the point, even though the Amish are, well, it doesn't matter. Okay, so the Amish would be okay with it. I think we can manage it. But it is interesting that this is constantly kind of going on. Chaos is trying to break us up, trying to separate us. But now Christ talks about being in order, being together, being united under, and this is the big difference, his order. Okay? Because the Tower of Babel, different governments throughout the world, it's man's order. And Christ spent a very long time saying, my order is different than your order. The kingdom of heaven operates different than the kingdoms of earth. Okay? My order is perfect. My order is fulfilling. My order will bring about salvation. Your order's terrible, okay? Your order brings strife, suffering, pain, separation, okay? And so this is kind of one of the reasons why this hyper order is bad. Like order itself, God's order is good. God's order was perfect. In the creation, it was perfect, okay? And so we look at Jesus now. I'm going to bring this to us in a minute, in a personal level, because I think we're talking about big things, but I want to bring it down to you, okay? But when we talk about this story, we have to look at Jesus. Okay? There's men and women who live in chaos, and there's men and women who live in order, and there's kind of an in-between, right? Where everybody's kind of somewhere in this way. I find it very interesting that the ones that Christ butted heads with were the ones who had their order down. Okay? There was no room for God to work. And God created order within chaos. And Jesus constantly would go after those people that nobody else would go after because they were too far gone. And it's almost as if in chaos we run from God. In order we push God out. Pushing him away versus running away. One or the other. Neither is good. But God seems to be more inclined to chase after somebody than someone who's deliberately stiff-arming him and saying, no, Jesus, I don't like your ways because this is the way we do it here, right? This is the way I do it in my life. So I'm used to the other one. This is the way I do it in my life, right? I don't do this, Jesus. I don't love my enemies. No, I get back at them. No, I sit there every night in bed and stare at the ceiling and plan how I'm going to get them. They did something to me 5 years ago. They don't even remember my name, but I'm going to get them as soon as I figure out where they are and how to find them, right? I love that people are like, yeah, okay. No, that's not me, right? No one else has ever done it. It's just me. All right. But the Pharisees were the ones who we talk about all the time. They were the order. But there was another group called the Sadducees. They were worse than the Pharisees, okay? Sadducees didn't even believe in resurrection. Like, I don't know how they got through the Old Testament, but they didn't believe in resurrection either. Okay, so for Jesus, this kind of, right, the guy who's about to be resurrected is like, he doesn't deal with them too much. In fact, he deals with the Pharisees more because I actually think the Pharisees were much closer to Jesus in theology than the Sadducees. I think the Sadducees were so far gone that Jesus didn't even bother with them. He didn't even, he has a couple instances where he mentions them. He has one time, and the only thing you really see him say to the Sadducees is he's like, you don't know Scripture and you don't understand the power of God. So you have Jesus, the Messiah, the Son of God here on earth, and the one thing he says to your group is, you don't understand Scripture and you don't know the power of God. Good job, guys. Way to go. All right, put that on your resume. Our group doesn't that's what Jesus said to them. He had no time for them. They were in hyper order and he was done with it. He was looking after the people the tax collectors. He was looking after people that weren't even in the church. Right? Not to say that running around in chaos is good, but he does leave the 99 to go find the one who runs away, right? And so I think, I'm not saying order is good. God's order is perfect. But when we go overboard, it becomes chaotic in a way, okay? And so why I say this is because I want to define this order for us, okay? I want to define God's order versus man's order. And it's very simple, okay? In order, when process takes precedent over people, that's man's order. When people prompt process, that's God's order. Christ was moved by others. The whole salvation plan hinged on people prompting God to move. God's love for them moved him. Christ's love for people moved him. If he walked to the woman at the well and Christ said, no, order before people, he would have never talked to her because he wasn't supposed to, because that's not the rules. That's not the way things are. I need to do it this way. I am a Pharisee. I am a priest. I don't talk to you. I don't do this. I don't do that. But Jesus was constantly like, no, you don't get it. The people are the point of all of this. And so when we look at this in our own personal life, though, when you're dealing with this, and because I know people understand this, like in a way, like I'm trying to control my environment and this and that. When your order starts destroying people, you got to reality check yourself. As a Christian, if you want to call yourself Christian and your order runs over people in the way, yikes, something's wrong. Okay, I know we don't usually talk about it this way, but I want to I always like to bring something different. When our order as a church runs over people, we got to check ourselves, right? When children are being children, and we're like, you're not allowed to be children, we got to check ourselves, right? When someone comes in and they don't dress right, they don't smell right, they don't act right, we got to check ourselves. You're not acting right. You're not in our order. Leave. Yet Jesus would go and say, hey, what's up? Hey, my order is to get you. My order is to love you. My order is to know you so you'll know me. And Jesus, probably the only person who ever walked this earth that could be arrogant, was always humble. People try to be arrogant, but that's just because they get to hide their problems, right? Like nobody knows their problems, so they walk around arrogant. But if you really rip the curtain back, you'd be like, you have no room, buddy, right? You can't be like that. But But Jesus is the one that you could have ripped back, and well, he can be arrogant. He's always right. He never messed up. He's never, right? But he didn't. He chose humility because that's the way he operated with people, okay? And so his order is the one that we should look after, okay? Christ's order, God's order, it's the same thing, right? Christ's order is different. Christ's order is when Jesus talks about what the kingdom of heaven is like, he's telling you, this is my order. This is the perfect order. This is the order that doesn't make sense to your flesh. It seems like chaos to your flesh, in fact. Like God's order, the kingdom of heaven seems like chaos when our flesh hears it. But when our spirit hears it, it's like, yes, please. That's what I'm looking for. Give me more of that, right? Loving your enemies. Our flesh is like, heck no, right? But our spirit's like, yeah, that's right, that's true. That's true. Giving instead of taking. Our flesh is like, that doesn't make any sense. That's chaos. We don't have much. We got to keep more. But our spirit is like, yeah, that's fulfilling. That's kindness. I go to bed tonight with a clear conscience because I gave, because I loved, because I ripped the shirt off my back to give it to somebody who didn't have it, right? I gave someone my coat because I know they couldn't afford it. I gave them room and board for free because they needed help. And it seems like that doesn't make sense to our flesh. Our flesh is like, that's chaos. And it's very interesting that our fallen state recognizes God's order as chaos. But our fallen state recognizes what God calls chaos as order. Are you following me with that? It's a little weird. But one of the things that I always like to say, and I'm going to wrap it up here soon, okay? I heard it from a teacher at Christ for the Nations, my favorite teacher. He's awesome. He was one of those people that would just make you think, and the whole room would just be like, my brain. Like you felt like your brain ran a couple miles during his classes. And you're just like, why does he know so much, right? He's just really, 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 really wise. By the way, God's order is wisdom, by the way. It was the knowledge of good and evil that got us in trouble, but wisdom is the answer to this. But he said this phrase, and it's the last slide. He said this phrase, and it always stuck with me, okay? No mess, there's no ministry. No chaos, no ministry. When we try to sanitize everything, there's no ministry, personally or collectively. When we try to sanitize other people before they even convert, well, there's no reason for Jesus then, right? But the law was insufficient to do what grace did, right? No mess, no ministry. I really think that this phrase, it breaks this entire precedent in our lives when we realize that. It's like, do I really want to have like those 10 people over to my house? I shouldn't probably talk about family, but it's extended family, right? So it's okay. I have a certain relative that might be a sister to my mom. And her house is perfect, right? Like there's no dust. I don't think there's dust in there. I don't think it's allowed. I think the dust comes and it just leaves. But it's perfect. Everything is set up. Her Christmas trees, oh my gosh, right? Her yard, her flowers, her everything is in its perfect place for its perfect time. You best not mess it up. Pretty sure this comes from my grandma, by the way. But so this is the way things are. And I remember my uncle talk. He's not like that, right? And he's like 6'6". He drives truck and stuff like that. He's a real big guy. It's funny because she's little and he's big, and she's all like, everything needs to be perfect. And he's like, eh. But he was mowing the lawn, and they lived on 2 acres. He was mowing the lawn, and they had their lawn just went back. It was kind of 2 acres, but it was real long. And he must have ran over one of the flowers way back in the back, around the corner, like you can't see it. He said within 15 minutes, he don't even know how she knew, but she knew, you ran over my flower, didn't you? And he's like, I guess. I don't know. But this state, it's some of you might relate. I don't relate to this, but yeah, okay, you can relate, right? Especially when you have company coming over, right? And it's like, I always love the jokes about the mom getting ready when company's coming over. It's like, we can't pretend anybody lives here. But this is all going on, right? And this is the way she is, but it's kind of like, but family. There's toddlers. There's chaos coming in. And if you and now she's kind to the kids and stuff like that, but if you hyper focus on this, you miss the beauty of life and humanity. And so I have a story I want to read real quick, and then we'll go into closing here. While at the park, and I want you to think about this story and then kind of expand it out into your own life. Okay, so I'm just trying to break some chains here this morning. So I hope. Okay, break every chain. Let's go. Michelle did really good. She's not here today, but anyways, while at the park one day, a woman sat down next to a man on a bench near a playground. "That's my son over there," she said, pointing to a little boy in a red sweater who was sliding down a slide. "That's a fine-looking boy," the man said. "That's my daughter over there on the bike in the white dress." Then, looking at his watch, he called to his daughter. "What do you say we go now, Melissa?" Melissa pleaded, "Just 5 more minutes." Every parent knows this. Just 5 more minutes. "Please, Dad?" Just 5 more minutes. The man nodded, and Melissa continued to ride her bike to her heart's content. 5 minutes passed, and the father stood up and called again. "Time to go now?" Again, Melissa pleaded, 5 more minutes, right? Just like every other kid. And now, when we're operating where everything needs to be under our control, this is not allowed, right? This is annoying. I've been there. I watch toddlers. I watch a toddler every day, all day, right? I know what it's like. It's like, we're trying to get dressed. Why are you trying to dance? Like, those two things, they do not go together. And every parent who's tried to put on socks to a little one who just kicks all the time, it's just really fun. Anyways, so Melissa pleaded, just 5 more minutes again. All right? The man nodded, and Melissa continued to ride her bike to her heart's content. Okay? She said again, 5 more minutes. He said, okay. And the woman said, you certainly are a patient father. And the man smiled at her and said, her older brother Tommy was killed by a drunk driver last year while he was riding his bike here. I never spent much time with Tommy, and now I'd give anything for just 5 more minutes with him. I vowed not to make the same mistake with Melissa. People. That prompts our processes as a Christian. People drive us. Love drives us. Compassion should be our driving force. Order for the sake of order is not God. Order for the sake of love is God. When we take our perspective and look at people the way Christ does, it changes everything about the way we operate. When you see everybody as someone loved by Christ, somebody who has thoughts, fears, passions, beliefs, sometimes different opinions. When you start to value people, this man's order just becomes irrelevant, right? It's nice to have things in order. It's nice to have things together. And I don't want to overshoot this and go too far gone and say just everybody do whatever they want all the time, because that's not love either. Anybody who has a kid knows if you let them do whatever they want, that's not love, right? You cannot live on a diet of Oreos. Where's my daughter? I tell her. No, she would live on popsicles. That's what she would do. We set a time limit at 11 o'clock. We're not allowed to have popsicles before 11 o'clock. but she doesn't know how to tell time. So it'll be like 9:30, and she'll be like, oh, it's after 11. Time for popsicle, like every day. Like she just guesses. So it's really funny. But I try to teach her time, but this is all I would eat. But that's not love either, right? When order it naturally comes about when we operate in love, okay? Enablement's not love. Just throw that out there. So man's order does not have this kind of perspective that God's order has, okay? God's order is also known as wisdom. And the cool thing about God's order is you don't have to blindly believe it. It's one of my favorite things about the Bible, about Christ, about his teachings. You don't have to blindly believe it, okay? Because you can see it. If you are aware of yourself and what's going on, you will see Christ's truth present itself, manifest itself, and be true. Problem is, our flesh then comes in and says, yeah, but that was just a fluke. That was just weird. You gave that thing away that you valued to somebody who needed it. And you felt good about it, but that was just random. That was just because that's what you heard at church. That was just because of this and that and the other thing. But it's not. Christ's truths are self-evident. And that's the coolest thing about it. When they asked him, they said, well, prove yourself. Prove that you're the Son of God. He said, look, fine, don't believe me. Believe my works. And I think we have a whole nation of young people who they hear oftentimes, just believe him. And if you don't believe him, you're wrong. All right? And we try to say, Jesus, he did this, he did that, he did this. And it's like, yeah, but I don't believe him. I don't believe him. We sometimes never say, hey, look at his works. Start doing what he says and watch your whole life change. Start operating as Christ calls us to, and start watching those who do and see how much happier they are, content they are. They might not be happy every moment of every day, but they're more fulfilled. They have better lives. They have better relationships, better families. They're fulfilled. And in a whole country, a whole world that's looking to be fulfilled and have purpose, that's something that's immeasurably valuable that the church has or should have. Christ has, for sure, okay? And so when we check ourselves and in a personal manner, do people come before our processes? Do people dictate what we do? Or are you mad when people don't fit your order? In the Tower of Babel, everybody was trying to assimilate into one belief, one language, one system. Okay? There was no room for other things. How horrible would that be? Actually, America wouldn't even work because America has some of everything coming in. And that's what's really cool. You want Mexican food? You can go get Mexican food. We don't even have, what do we have, hot dogs? That's what American food is? I guess we took all the leftovers and let's put it in a meat cylinder. I probably shouldn't say that. Okay, but someone's like, I was just going to go have a hot dog for lunch. I guess, no, but that was our contribution, right? No, but we do some things. But it's really fascinating, the beauty when you step back and look at the different cultures, even this church. I think one of the things that guest speakers say all the time is it's a diverse church. What? And they're that's beautiful. That's amazing. And it really is. It's almost like instead of having just one good idea and everybody goes to that, you can have 15 good ideas and pick one for the day. Right? You wanna go, and I like to use food because it's an easy example, but there's all kinds of food. And if it was just one type of food, if it was just, no offense, if it was just Italian food, just pastas and breads all the time, America wouldn't do well with that. But or if it was just some, now my wife would be okay with this, but just steak and potatoes all the time. She's like, yeah. But when you want diversity, when you want difference, It's like you can have, some of you might not like this, but you can have sushi, and it's good. And then you can have barbecue, and it's good. It's so beautiful when all of it comes together. And when it's all there, we went down to the marketplace in Harrisburg. What's that called? Broad Street Market. I couldn't remember what it was called. That place was amazing. My mind was blown. I was like, this is fantastic. Like, what? No, I never went there before. I went to school on 2nd Street, and I'd never been there until just recently. And I'm like, this is why my life is changed forever. Why am I talking about this? I had a bunch of Korean friends in CF&I, and then there's no Korean places to eat up here, but there is there. I was like, whoa. But then I was like, but there's other places I want to try too. Now I got to come back and hit all these other places up because they're all good. But that is what the church should look like. Not a place trying to assimilate into just one thing, but everyone coming together over Jesus, bringing in their own pieces, right? Their own language, their own belief, their own style. Their own style, please. Worship. Yeah. I don't like the same style. I don't know if anybody else listens to just one style of music, but I get tired of one type of music. I like all kinds of music. I'd love to play funk worship, but I don't really know if that's a thing. I don't think I've ever seen funk music for worship, but I would love it. But anyways, so I don't know why I'm tangenting. Okay, all right, 11:30, we're good. I'm going to pray us out, and I just want you to keep in mind, no mess, no ministry. Take that home with you and deal with it. No mess, no ministry. All right? God, I thank you for these people. I thank you for the congregation at Word of Grace, all those who came out and all those who couldn't make it today. I pray that they are aware of you and your ways and your order in their lives, and that as they move forward, they might remind themselves that the chaos around them is a perfect place to bring in God's order. And I pray if they're thinking about somebody that's triggering them right now, that they're thinking of that person and I could love them better. I could stop pushing them away because of order. I pray that you help reunite that relationship and you help kind of kindle the fire in that relationship again. And I pray that as a church, as a body, we all understand this for one another. That each person might look messy to us, but sometimes we look messy to them too, and we all work together. I pray that there's a unity in this church that all flies under the flag of Christ. That we all come together for Christ's sake, even if somebody else disagrees with us in other places. Just because someone has a different political stance doesn't mean that Christ isn't their Lord too. And I do pray for a unity in this place, for every age, for every color, every background, every theology. I pray that we all come together in this place. In Jesus' name, amen.